This in my hands here is the brand new 2020 iPad, or the 8th generation iPad, and some would call this the basic iPad. However, it's anything but basic, and I'll explain why in this video review here on EMKWAN Reviews. Welcome back to the channel, guys and girls. You're watching me, EMKWAN, here on EMKWAN Reviews. Now, before we get into today's video, if you're new around here, be sure to smash that subscribe button, hit the bell icon so that you can see more video content like this as it goes live. I've got a lot more tech stuff, some exclusive stuff coming up later on this month, so be sure to be subscribed for all that goodness. Start talking about the iPad itself. I just want to show you what you can expect if you pick this up. To begin with, we're going to get the standard paperwork that we have come to expect, including a SIM ejector tool. If you're going to get the cellular version, which is what this is here, you're going to get the warranty information and the Apple stickers, which my kids have stolen. And then inside here, you're going to get this charging brick. This is in fact a 20-watt charger, and it has a USB-C connection over there. What is interesting is that the cable that comes included has a USB-C to Lightning cable. So this is it, the 8th generation iPad. Let's start off by taking a look at the design, because visually at least, not much seems to have changed from the previous generation iPad. You still have the speakers in between the Lightning ports. This is the cellular version, so we have a SIM tray there with the cellular band at the top, the Apple logo, the iPad logo, the rear camera, volume, rocker. We have the power button at the top next to the band, and then on the far left hand side we have the 3.5mm headphone jack. On the front you have the familiar design, so you've got the slightly thicker bezels on the top and the bottom with the slightly thinner bezels on the side. Some would say that it's a bit of an outdated look now with the iPad, but I guess in some ways it still works. The fact that you have the front facing camera hidden in the top bezel, and then in the bottom bezel you have that home button, which also doubles up as Touch ID. I guess in 2020 Touch ID certainly feels more useful than the standard Face ID. But what is also interesting is that this iPad, I think, is appealing to a slightly different demographic than, let's say, the iPad Pro or even the iPad Air. A lot of those people are still familiar with this home button, that one button that takes you back home, as opposed to the gestures that you get with the newer iPads. As far as the display is concerned, it's still a Retina display, which is a very, very good display. A 10.2 inch 2160 by 1620 with 264 ppi. It's got a good brightness as well, 500 nits. Well, it's going to be great in this kind of environment where we get a lot of sun. And that display still does a very, very good job in terms of pretty much what we've come to expect from an iPad in terms of visuals for media consumption, videos, playing games. Most people are going to be more than happy with that display quality. So most of this year's changes have happened internally. So the newer iPad comes with the A12 Bionic chipset, which also uses the neural processing engine. The A12 Bionic chipset is a very capable chipset. It's what powers the iPad, and we've seen this in the past with the iPhone XS, the XS Max, the iPhone XR. So from a performance capability, it does a very, very good job. And then when you combine it with the capabilities of iPadOS 14, which also runs on the iPad 8th generation, you're going to get a very, very good combination, particularly for day-to-day scenarios. So look, I've used this as I would expect most people to kind of use their iPads in terms of gaming, in terms of web browsing, media consumption, perhaps the occasional content creation as well, in terms of slight video editing, photo editing as well. It all performs incredibly, incredibly well with this. Now, will it compare with, let's say, the iPad Pro or the iPad Air? Certainly not. I mean, in terms of even video editing, it is a slightly slower process on this iPad. It will do it. But if you're gonna start playing around with 4K video, with LumaFusion, with iMovie perhaps, it's probably better to consider the iPad Air or even the iPad Pro. But most people who might be picking up the iPad are likely going to be the people who are going to be using this for the web browsing, for media consumption, for documents, pages, perhaps even using this to work at home or study at home. I think in those situations, the iPad 8th generation with the A12 Bionic chipset combined with iPadOS 14 is going to be more than adequate. Now, as far as iPadOS 14 is concerned, one of the features on the new iPad involves this, the Apple Pencil. So as a disclaimer, the iPad 8th generation will support the Apple Pencil, but only the 1st generation Apple Pencil, which is a bit unfortunate because based on experience, if I was to compare both the 2nd generation and the 1st generation, I actually prefer using the 2nd generation Apple Pencil. That's the one that attaches with magnets on the side of the iPad Air or the iPad Pro. It just feels better in the hand, and it would have been nice to see Apple support that with the iPad 8th generation, but alas, it doesn't, so we have to stick with the 1st generation. Now, if you overlook the really awkward charging experience, which thankfully you don't have to do that often, it's still a very capable accessory. And iPadOS 14 has a feature called Scribble. This is a really useful feature that allows you to use your natural handwriting to interact with the overall iPad operating system, but specifically works very well in certain word processing application, notes, pages, so on. And it gives you a very good control, and it makes the functionality of the iPad as just a tablet that works with a keyboard, but also a tablet that will work with your natural handwriting, and it's much more intuitive. It's actually much more enjoyable to use once you get into it. Now, another thing is that the iPad 8th generation does have 2 cameras. The rear camera is slightly better. It's an 8 megapixel f2.4. It does support video as well, 1080p up to 30 frames per second. But in terms of quality wise, it does a reasonable job. Nothing to kind of shout home about. Not anywhere near at the same quality of the iPad Air or the iPad Pro. The front-facing camera is a FaceTime HD camera. This one it's very basic. It's a 1.2 megapixel f2.4. It's going to be okay, I would say reasonable. Gets the job done for FaceTime and video conferencing, but the cameras are there for you whenever you need them, and I guess that makes it convenient as well. So the iPad, as I mentioned in the beginning, is basic, but is it basic? I mean, this is the thing. In terms of what we get this year with the iPad 8th generation, some would say that, yeah, it is basic. There's nothing fundamentally that's changed in the styling, the design, but what I would say is that the main updates have happened internally. And if you compare this generation iPad with the previous generation iPad, that performance bump and at the price point makes it quite an interesting device given what is happening around us today. Many people working from home, studying from home, might be looking for a budget laptop of sorts. And in many ways, I think the iPad does actually a better job at being that budget laptop than many standard budget laptops out there. If you pair it up with accessories like the Apple Pencil, the Apple Folio case, you're gonna get actually a device that is thinner, that is much more intuitive in terms of user experience, particularly with iPadOS 14. And it's actually a device that performance-wise is gonna more than likely outperform some of those budget laptops. And that's, I think, the biggest strength of this year's iPad, the 8th generation iPad. Now, in terms of color and look, we still get the same color, space gray, silver, and the gold. And in terms of capacity, we get the 32 gigabyte or 128 gigabyte variation. I'd love to know your thoughts, so leave them in the comment section down below. Let me know what you think of this year's iPads. Are you excited? And if you're new around here, be sure to smash that subscribe button so you see more video content like this as it goes live. That's it from me for now. Stay safe. I'll see you in the next video here on EMKWAN Reviews. Until then, peace and blessings.